And welcome back to another episode of Dogs on the Couch, where everybody's allowed to have an opinion. It does not matter if you played the game, you were watching. So you're allowed to have an opinion as well. So I am, forgive me, I'm actually uh 2 weeks 2 weeks further into the season. The Browns have had a game against the Baltimore Ravens as well as the Green Bay Packers. A loss against the Ravens and a struggle of a win against the Green Bay Packers that you can credit solely to the defense and special teams. That's the reason that the Browns won the Green Bay Packers game. However, um, do a different video as far as like diving into the nuances of the game themselves. But my main focus is the narratives and the way that the Browns media pushes certain narratives depending on what player you are or if they like you as a person, or pause, if they think you're a handsome guy like they do with Kevin Stefanski. So if they think you're handsome or if they like you as a person, they'll come up with excuses for why you're not doing your job correctly. However, if they don't like you or if they don't think you're a handsome guy, then they're going to burn you at the stake, buddy. Like, they're going to exile you is what they're going to do. Okay? I'm a person who likes to keep what's called the same energy. When it comes to things like, if I'm going to criticize one person for not holding themselves accountable, then I'll criticize the next person for not holding themselves accountable. I won't do it to one person, but then the next person say, oh, well, he's really not accountable for that, and start coming up with excuses and different things of that nature. No, I'm going to keep the same energy. Like, it kind of is what it is. So that's kind of what I would like to point out in this specific video, how Browns media does not like to keep the same energy, and instead they love to push their own personal narratives for players, coaches, and or people that they just like. And I'm a part of the winning group, the group of winners, people who like to win, people who want to be winners. And sometimes, liking a person doesn't have anything to do with are you winning or are you not. I could like you all I want to, but if you're not winning, then it's not doing me any good that I like you so much. Yes, I like you so much. You're such a great guy. You got this great beard, or whatever we may say, but you're not winning. Your job is to win games, not to be liked by everyone or to think that everyone to think that you're a good-looking individual. Like, it's not why we play the game of football. It's to win the games, not to be liked by everyone. I named tons of players who were not liked by everyone, but it didn't change how they played on the field. Like, they played on the field and dominated, whether anyone liked them or whether they didn't. So, of course, let's get into this quarterback situation, and let's talk about how we pushed this narrative of killing Deshaun Watson last year. And, you know, uh, despite all of the things that were going wrong with the offense outside of Deshaun, well, the reason that the offense looked so bad, it wasn't any of these other things. It wasn't the offensive line. It wasn't not having a running game. It wasn't the kicker missing kicks. It was just simply the quarterback was so terrible. How could you do anything? How could you possibly win a game with a quarterback that is this god awful? It's all his fault. Everything is his fault. And if you just swap out at the quarterback position, you'll look much better and you'll be winning these, close games in which you can't win, with having such a terrible quarterback as in Deshaun Watson, being out there. So what I would like to do first is acknowledge how bad Joe Flacco has been to start out these first 3 games of the year. Okay, after week 2, when he lost against the Ravens, you kind of started to hear more people start to clamor for, hey man, maybe we should just give one of the rookies a chance. But what the narrative pushers are doing is they continue to come up with excuses for Joe Flacco. Oh, well, this line isn't good, and we got to start looking at, why didn't we draft anybody for the offensive line? Oh, the receivers are dropping the ball. Jerry Jeudy has to play like a true number one. We don't know. Seems like some of the receivers aren't necessarily creating separation down the field. So, Flacco is really, is put in a tight situation here when the front four is getting a push, and he doesn't really have time to see guys. Other people, however, some people are holding Flacco accountable, saying, hey, there are guys down the field open. He's looking in the direction. He just didn't throw the ball over there for whatever reason. Like we not understanding. Is he scared? Is he playing timid? Why is he not playing loose? It's all of these dink and dunk throws, just dinking and dunking the ball. No throws to the intermediate part of the field, which was one of these things that we killed Deshaun Watson about. Like he can't make these intermediate throws. His arm is a noodle. So he can't see these intermediate throws, and then when he does see them, he can't make the throw. However, when Joe Flacco is doing the exact same thing this year, we're not just putting it all on Joe Flacco and saying, well, any other quarterback would be better than this guy. In fact, we're giving excuses. That's what we're doing. So what I would like to do first is, again, give proof. I use Quincy a lot. He's one of the main narrative pushers, if you will. It's just like, oh, you know so much about football, but yet you push narratives. And it's like, hey, man, some narratives shouldn't be pushed if you know football. And then if you are going to push those narratives, the only thing that I ask is that you keep the same energy. It's the only thing I ask. So here, we'll take a very quick listen to what Quincy's, idea, what he thinks about why, Flacco plays so terrible. And this clip in specific is in regards to the Baltimore Ravens game, the showing that he put up in the Baltimore Ravens game. Quick couple stats from that Baltimore Ravens game from Joe Flacco. He was 25 for 45. That's almost about a 50% completion percentage. Absolutely terrible. And mind you, those are dinking and dunking throws. It's not like you're throwing the ball down the field. 25 for 45, 199 yards, an interception, a fumble, and a touchdown. The touchdown actually should have been an interception because the defender caught it and then lost it up in the air, and then Cedric Tillman ended up catching it in the end zone. So, yes, he gets credit for the touchdown, but the same way that we kind of took away his interceptions when the receivers dropped the ball and it went up in the air and it was intercepted, well, I got to keep the same energy. If that touchdown was only a touchdown because the defender dropped the pass, it's like, well, I can't really give you credit for that touchdown. But anyway, 25 for 45, 199 yards, one touchdown, one interception, and one lost fumble. Another side note, one of the next gen stats, he actually put up the lowest EPA, expected points added. That's the lowest single game EPA in a Browns uniform since DeShone Kizer. Because the worst quarterbacks in Browns history right now, what people like to say, arguably, it's either between DeShone Kizer or Deshaun Watson. So for you to put up the lowest single game EPA since DeShone Kizer, that is wild. I don't understand I don't get that one. I don't get how we could come up with any excuses for that. But let's take a listen.
The big question about this game is just how much of it was bad offensive play by the Cleveland Browns versus good defensive play from the Baltimore Ravens. And I'm here to tell you that the answer to that question is going to be far more complicated than I think a lot of people want that answer to be. I think everybody wants a simple solution. Oh, it's the quarterback. Bench the quarterback. Oh, it's this offensive lineman. Bench that offensive lineman. Put a new offensive lineman in. But the reason problems are hard to solve in football are because problems aren't often that simple, right? That direct in football.
Oh, it's going to be, the issue is going to be so much more complicated than, just the quarterback or just the offensive line. There's no way, it's just not that simple. People want it to be that simple. And he always says people, you know what I mean? And sometimes what's so crazy is just like, I mean, at one point you were one of the people that you're talking about. Like at one point, you, my guy, were one of those people that you're talking about. So I just find it ironic that when it's Joe Flacco, it's not that simple, to where it's just it's one thing, and it's just the quarterback or it's just the offensive line, it's just in the world of football, it's not just that, it's not just that simple. You know what I mean? However, what's so beautiful about today's day and age is we have what's called receipts. Through social media, we're able to keep receipts because we record these things when we say them. So you can always go back and have revisionist history. That's why a lot of times some people will be like, well, you're bringing up stuff from the past, and they'll get mad because you're holding them accountable to something that they said before, and they're not keeping the same energy about a similar situation now. And so they get upset because they don't want you to point that out. And here's precisely what I'm going to do. That's precisely what I'm going to do, because last year, when we suffered from quote unquote terrible quarterback play, the solution was very simple. In fact, the same person that you just heard saying that it's not that simple, he actually says it's that simple. If you just switch out Deshaun Watson, look at it, because he was the driving force as to why that offense was so terrible, was so bad. So let's hear the same guy just last year, when the quarterback's name was Deshaun Watson instead of Joe Flacco. Let's hear what his solution to the problem was then.
And a lot of people, while it was happening, or at least some people while it was happening, really wanted to downplay the impact of how bad Deshaun Watson's play was and how much that was hurting the team. I don't think there was a lot of people who would be willing to admit that, like, Deshaun Watson was good in 2024 at least. But I do think there were a lot of people who thought that talk about how much Deshaun is affecting the team was a bit overblown, that people were focusing on it too much, that there were other issues to focus on outside of the quarterback position, and that if you change quarterbacks, it wasn't going to completely transform what this team looked like.
What's so crazy is what he's mocking people for saying about Deshaun Watson. That's the exact same thing he's saying to defend Joe Flacco this year. So the same stuff that you criticized people for pointing out last year, not necessarily to defend Deshaun Watson's poor quarterback play, but to just simply point out that there's more wrong than just Deshaun Watson. Like if these other things were going right and then Deshaun still looked the way that he looked, then we could point to him and say it's all his fault. But what some of us were doing is, no, we weren't saying Deshaun was playing good. No, we weren't saying that. What we were saying is, well, if we're going to talk about how bad Deshaun's playing, why aren't we talking about how bad this other stuff is? How bad the kicker is missing kicks, how bad the offensive line is not blocking, how bad the running backs are, or how bad the scheme is that isn't getting the running backs going, or whatever, or how bad the play calls are, or anything to that nature. That's what we were talking about. However, you're criticizing people for doing that last year in terms of Deshaun Watson, but this year, those are the exact excuses that you're using to help try to save Joe Flacco. Let's listen to a little bit more.
Right? I heard a lot of arguments. It's not just him. Any quarterback would look bad behind this offensive line. I saw the comments, oh, it's not just him. I mean, look how garbage these wide receivers are. It's not just him. There's no run game, right? It's the play caller or it's Ken Dorsey's fault, ironically enough, because Ken Dorsey now gets the play sheet and now people are acting like that's the solution. The reality of what the problem had been for the first 7 games of the season, it smacked everybody in the face. It's simple. A lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it was just Deshaun Watson. It's really that simple. They went.
Wait a minute. So the same guy that said, well, if you just swap out the quarterback, it's not that simple. A game of football, it's a lot more complicated than, just swapping out a quarterback. Well, but just last year, I just heard you say, well, no, it's that simple. Deshaun Watson, it's that simple. He's so bad that he's the one messing everything up because he's that bad. It's that simple. That's precisely what I just heard you say. So if it was just that simple last year, well, why isn't it that simple this year? Why last year were we not allowed to say anything about the offensive line, to say anything about the running game, to say anything about Amari Cooper leading the league in drops when he was here, and then Jerry Jeudy finishing the season leading the league in drops? So that was the number one that you started out with, and then the number one that replaced him. Both of them led the league in drops. The one led the league in drops while he was here. Then when he left, the one who replaced him ended up finishing the season leading the league in drops. But we didn't talk about that. We only talked about how bad the quarterback play was. I even want to play a little bit more. Let's just listen to a little bit more of, him, again, speaking on just how terrible Deshaun Watson is and how it's all his fault.
From a team that could not beat the New York Giants to a team that beat the Baltimore Ravens in one position changed. They didn't fire the coach. They didn't scrap the entire offensive philosophy. They lost the wide receiver. From the Giants game to now, they lost the wide receiver. And yet they looked exponentially better. What changed? Some people wanted me to just criticize.
Really quickly, it wasn't just because I pointed this out back then when I was talking about it. It wasn't just the quarterback that changed. The narrative pushers only wanted to mention the quarterback change. What also happened when Jameis Winston was put in, Ken Dorsey took over the play calling. Like that's what happened. Ken Dorsey took over the play calling as well. Winston wanted Kevin Stefanski to call the plays for him. That was the reason Winston even came here, was to be up under Kevin Stefanski. But when Winston went to Kevin Stefanski, like, hey, man, what's up? I'm in here now. Let's go. We ready, right? Stefanski blew him off and said, go talk to Dorsey. He the one calling the plays for you. Go talk to him. You'll be good. And for Winston, that was confusing. And for me as well. I'm wondering, like, well, why? I mean, this is the perfect quarterback to run your system, right? That's why he came here, right? So why you don't want to call? You want to call plays for Deshaun, who wasn't here for you, but the guy that is here for you, well, you don't want to call plays for him. But that doesn't make any sense. So again, I point that out to say, well, no, it wasn't just a swap at quarterback, because, again, this was after Jameis Winston, won the game against, the Baltimore Ravens. Well, Ken Dorsey was also swapped in as the play caller. So we kind of got to add that in there too, man. It wasn't just a quarterback swap, like you tried to make it seem. It was also changing of the play caller as well. You know what I mean? And in the first clip where he's saying it's not that simple, a lot of the reason is that he was giving it wasn't that simple is because, well, the Baltimore Ravens defense is just so good. And if they're going to get pressure with the front four, then it doesn't matter what quarterback is in there. They're not going to look good. But in this clip right here, he just said he was criticizing people for saying, oh, well, as bad as his offensive line is, it's not going to matter what quarterback's in there. He criticized people for saying that last year when it was Deshaun Watson. But this year, when you lose to the Baltimore Ravens, the same team that Jameis Winston was able to beat last year, going 27 of 41, 334 yards, 3 TDs, and the W against the Ravens last year. That was the Winston and Ken Dorsey offense. Because one of the other reasons that Mr. Quincy gives is the why the Browns, he said they're axing, he says axe instead of ask. They're axing too much of the quarterback. You can't throw the ball 40 sometimes and expect to win a game, with this offense or whatever, what have you. But just last year against the same Baltimore Ravens team, which some would probably argue the Ravens looked better last year than they do through the first 3 years. Through the first 3 games of this season. Pretty sure people would say that they look better as a team last year than they do through the first 3 weeks of this year. I'm pretty sure most people would say that. This same defense last year, Jameis Winston threw the ball 41 times. What you said that the offense can't do and think that they're going to win, well, they did precisely that last year under Ken Dorsey and Jameis Winston. 27 of 41, 334 yards, 3 TDs in the dub. So apparently, you can throw the ball 40 sometimes against the Ravens and win. Apparently it is possible. So listen to a tad bit more of the garbage narratives. Let's listen to a little bit more if we shall.
The offensive line as if they are equal as percentage of the problem as Watson. And my whole point while he was out there was like, hey, we cannot act like Watson is simply a factor in what's going on with this offense. He's the driving force of why this offense is bad. He plays the quarterback position. We usually understand this concept when the quarterback plays well. But that quarterback starts playing bad, and all of a sudden, it's like the quarterback's not the most important player on the field anymore. That quarterback starts playing bad, all of a sudden, left tackle's just as important as quarterback. The wide receivers is just as important as quarterback. But when the quarterback's playing well, we all understand, hey, that guy can change and transform a mediocre unit into a great one.
Isn't that just, that is the epitome of hypocrisy. Because now when it's Joe Flacco, well, that's precisely what we're doing. All of these other things are just as important as getting good quarterback play. The defense was playing lights out. Had the highest 3-and-out ratio in the league, if I'm not mistaken. Instead of just focusing on the quarterback is so terrible and he needs to be better to help out this great defense, you know what they started saying? Well, the defense, they need to start creating turnovers. They're not creating any turnovers. So now what you're saying is the defense creating turnovers is just as important as the quarterback play. What he just was criticizing people for saying when it came to Deshaun Watson, well, yes, the protection is just as important as the quarterback play. Well, yes, the receivers getting open and catching the ball is just as important as the quarterback play. Yes, the kicker making simple field goals or extra point kicks, yes, that's just as important as the quarterback play, because you could have great quarterback play, set you up for a game-winning field goal, and then the kicker missed the field goal. So what good did it do for you to have that amazing quarterback play if the kicker couldn't seal the deal for you? So yes, in that moment, the kicker was just as important as that quarterback. He sure was. The offensive line, they have to be able to protect in order for the quarterback to be able to deliver the ball on time and on target, especially in this Stefanski system, because it's all about timing. You got to be on time and on target. So in order to be on time and on target, you know what you need? You need protection. The offensive line is going to have to hold up. The front four can't be getting into the backfield and pressuring your quarterback. But somehow when it's Joe Flacco, we can see these things. We can acknowledge those things. But last year when it was Deshaun Watson, somehow we couldn't see those things. We weren't able to acknowledge those things. When it was Deshaun Watson, well, it was all Deshaun Watson's fault because he's god awful. He's so terrible that how could you possibly win with a guy that is just so god awful? He's just so terrible. Just look at his numbers. They're terrible. And then yet here we have Joe Flacco delivering, just again, some of the worst numbers that we've seen, since Deshaun Kaiser, putting up very similar numbers to what Deshaun Watson was putting up through the first 6 or 7 games last year. Very similar numbers. In fact, Joe is turning the ball over more than what Deshaun Watson was doing. At least with how bad Deshaun Watson was looking out there, at least he wasn't turning the ball over a whole lot. Joe's turning the ball over as well as missing throws, not seeing people, or if he does see them, he's not pulling the trigger. He won't throw the ball down there to these intermediate parts of the field. And last year, Quincy gave this whole thing about how, well, the receivers, the reason that they're not getting open is because they don't feel like the ball is going to come their way. So they're not really running as hard as because, you can only reach your top speed when you're at the intermediate parts of the field, and Deshaun just simply isn't throwing there. So that's why the receivers look garbage. But this year, the receivers have to step up. They have to catch the ball. They have to, even though that ball is low and away, they have to catch that. Well, why weren't we saying that when it was Deshaun Watson hitting Cedric Tillman right in between the numbers, and then he drops the ball? End of a potential game-winning drive. Instead, we blamed it on the quarterback and talked about how bad he played. Joe Flacco played terrible in this Green Bay Packers game. But because the defense and special teams won the game, well, all anybody wanted to talk about, they didn't even want to touch the quarterback. Because again, I believe some people are starting to notice where that narrative has driven them. And they remember how bad they talked about Deshaun Watson. And if they don't remember, it'll come up because he's still on the roster. So even if they don't remember how bad they talked about Deshaun Watson, they'll be reminded at some point. So it's like what they wanted to focus on was more just the win. Oh, well, we won against the Packers. We won. Yeah, you won. But it sure as heck wasn't because of the quarterback. I can tell you that. You won because of defense and special teams. And here's my thing. It's unfair to the entire football team to be asking the defense to have to put forth that kind of effort every week. That means they have to be perfect every week, meaning they have to force 3-and-outs as well as get turnovers. And when they do get the turnover, they have to get the turnover and put the ball basically on the 10-yard line. Because at one point in that Packers game, the offense had the ball, I believe, on the 1-yard line. And instead of just turning around and handing it to Quinshon Judkins, why not? Just turn around, give it to Quinshon Judkins. Instead, they call a play action pass for the third string tight end on a corner route, I believe. Why? For what? Why? I mean, that is terrible play calling. I mean, absolutely terrible play calling. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think we only ended up with a field goal. Again, starting with the ball on the 1-yard line. And then luckily, defense was able to get an interception, get us the ball close. I think we might have been on the 5 or something like that. And we were able to actually get the ball into the end zone on that particular possession. Again, thanks to the defense for getting us the ball so close. And then after that, you have a block, a field goal block by Denzel Ward, I believe, which actually would have sealed the game for Green Bay. So you get a big play on special teams, and then a couple pass completions or whatever gets you in field goal range for Schmidt. I think it might have been a 54-yarder somewhere around there. And Schmidt puts the ball through the uprights. Won the game on defense and special teams. It was not the offense. And so for me, like I said 2 weeks ago, time is ticking. And it's ticking fast. The Green Bay Packers win kind of helped muck things up a little bit. But please believe that seat is getting hot up under Kevin Stefanski. And the only thing that I believe is going to be able to save him, like save his job for next year, when it is time for Dillon Gabriel to come in, because I don't really foresee Flacco looking any different. And what's so crazy is, with Flacco looking exactly the way Deshaun is, nobody's saying about Flacco, oh, he'll never play another down of NFL football. He's just that terrible. When he looks just as bad as Deshaun Watson, I mean, he looks exactly the same. Exactly the same. In fact, worse, because he can't even scramble. At least Deshaun Watson could scramble around a little bit and extend the play. Flacco can't do that. He's a statue back there. He can't run away from anybody. So when it is time for Dillon Gabriel's going to have to get in there, and he's going to have to look very good. I mean, very good. Very good. Because if he doesn't, I truthfully believe that will be the final nail in Kevin Stefanski's coffin, and then he will be fired. Unfortunately, it'll be 5 years too late. I wanted the man gone in 2020. So, again, for all the Browns fans who enjoyed, the win against the Green Bay Packers, you should. Because, again, the goal is to win the game. That's the goal. The goal is to win the game. So, yes, great win. Way to go. Celebrate. The only thing that I would caution is I wouldn't want you to think that that's sustainable, that you will be able to win like that over the course of an entire 17-week football season. You may be able to get a couple wins here and there under those circumstances, but to think that you're going to be able to win week in and week out with your offense looking like that, I mean, that's preposterous. It's otherworldly if you think that that's going to be a recipe for winning football week in and week out. So we'll see. You got Detroit Lions coming up next. They're riding high off of a win against, the Baltimore Ravens. You know what I'm saying? They're running high, against after a win against Baltimore. So we'll see how the offense the offense and the quarterback ends up looking, against the Detroit Lions, and then we'll see what narrative we have to push next about the quarterback and the offense and why it looks so bad or why it doesn't look as bad as what our eyes are telling us that it looks, or what new excuses we have to come up with next that we weren't allowing people to use last year. Dogs on the couch, signing off.